Perfect. Thank you all for inviting me here, or I invited myself, but you accepted my invitation to come. I'm a retired teacher and I'm with the CEI Hub Task Force, and it's a volunteer team committed to raising awareness of the dangers of the critical energy infrastructure hub known as the CEI Hub. Anyway, really appreciate the opportunity to talk. The information that I'm sharing with you tonight comes from government sources, local and state studies, local medical and science experts. How many of you have heard about the CEI Hub? Great, good, perfect. So next, well, what is the CEI Hub? The CEI Hub is a 6.5 mile stretch of over 500 tanks between Highway 30 and Forest Park near the St. John's Bridge. They have a capacity in this area to hold more than 350 million gallons of liquid fuel. So think about more than 530 Olympic-sized pools worth, or over 900 football fields that would be 1 foot deep. 90% of all of Oregon's liquid fuels are stored at the hub, and 100% of Portland's jet fuel is stored there also. Next. We're going to look at some of the many health and safety risks associated with the hub. First, the hub, you can see on this map, is located on the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake fault. Seismologists predict a 40% chance of the big one within the next 50 years. Plus, the land the tanks sit on is made of soils that were once lakes and wetlands and will liquefy when the big one hits. Add this to that, fewer than 2% of the tanks were built since 1993. A majority were built before 1970, and some are from the 1930s. As of last year, only 1% of the tanks have been verifiably retrofitted according to the Department of Environmental Quality guidelines. In the big one, the tanks would be torn apart, setting off sparks in combustible liquids that would cause explosions, fires, toxic releases all over the Portland landscape. Next. Secondly, there's the all too real possibility of explosive and toxic rail accidents with trains carrying fuels and chemicals through Portland to the hub. Over 1,000 derailments occurred in the United States in 2022, and some of you may remember the derailment that happened in Mosier in 2016. It happened on my birthday, so I really remember it well. Third, there's a lot of health effects because of the hub, and it's day-to-day accumulative impacts of all of these fuels and chemicals, and they seriously harm bodily systems. And you can see some of the problems that arise, health problems that arise with having so many tanks and so much liquid toxic fuel stored there. Fourth, another existential risk of continuing to store and transport fossil and other carbon producing fuels at the hub is the intensification of a climate crisis. Remember the heat dome here in 2021, and just this past summer, we also had record temperatures nationally. Next. The CEI Hub sits within a 10-mile Superfund site in the Portland Harbor. The complex process to clean this area up is taking years and years and millions of dollars, and would all be for naught if we don't meaningfully address all of the risks at the hub. Next. State, county, and city studies have been issued that all point to severe dangers with regard to the predicted Cascadia earthquake. Next. After much community advocacy, the state took an important first step with Senate Bill 1567, the Fuel Tank Seismic Stability Program, which passed in 2022. Senators Dembrow and Graber took the lead on this. The question is this enough? And you can see what Representative Deja Graber, she was a firefighter with the Tualatin, or she is with the Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. She said a long overdue set of actions is needed to prepare the state for an inevitable catastrophe we know is coming our way. Next. So Senate Bill 1567 has 3 steps to it. The facilities have to submit their seismic risk assessments to the Department of Environmental Quality. Then they need to develop risk mitigation plans. And then they also need to then implement those plans with a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 10-year benchmarks. Well, how's it going? The report card is not good. Only 3 of 17 facilities are in full compliance on the timeline set out in the program rules. 14 of the 17 still have not provided complete risk assessments, which were due to DEQ in June of 2024. We need to keep up the community involvement and pressure on them. Next. So for many years, environmental and climate advocates have been creative and persistent in publicizing the dangers of the CEI hub operations and in pushing industry and government to deal with these dangers. In 2023 and 2024, the CEI hub task force and allies began a campaign to raise public awareness so that we could go beyond Senate Bill 1567. Next. Our task force asked we went around and asked neighborhood associations and other groups to join us in sending a letter to our public officials. This is some of what we asked them to do. We asked them to alert people to the dangers of the hub because so many people don't know anything about it. We asked them to monitor and mitigate cumulative pollution associated with operations at the hub. We asked them to coordinate a new plan for Oregon's fuel storage, not one on 90% on liquefaction soil. Require companies to take full financial responsibility for disaster prevention, emergency services, cleanup, and restoration. The letter was sent to all these folks that you're seeing up here on the screen, the governor, DEQ director, every state rep and senator, metro councilors, commissioners, city commissioners, and the federal delegation. Next. So you can see here we had a press conference in April 16th of 2024, and we announced that we had sent the letters. We had 48 signatory neighborhood associations and 37 signatory faith and community groups, and this made a difference by helping to raise awareness among electeds and then the city council candidates, many of which came to the press conference. This helps spur more government action on city, county, and state levels. So what are some of the actions taken by the public officials since then? Next. Two of four important pieces of the CEI hub legislation that were brought to the 2025 legislation session in Salem had legs. One of them, the House Bill 2949, was the risk bond regulation that would require the industries covered by the Department of Environmental Quality's fuel tank seismic stability program to put money up front to pay for disasters instead of making the public pay. HB 2152 directs the State Department of Energy to develop and implement a statewide geographic diversity of fueling stations for disaster reserves. So in the predicted earthquake scenario, communities around the state would actually have the needed fuel, and there'd be enough fuel to actually get the emergency, folks to put out all the fires and deal with the hub. Unfortunately, they didn't pass, mainly because hundreds of bills died in the Joint and Ways Means Committee pending passage of our great transportation package. So hopefully legislators are going to bring these back in the 2026 short session, but the public's going to need to speak out and make sure they get the attention they deserve. So stay tuned. Next. So how about the City of Portland's response to the hub? dangers. The past city council's response has been disappointing, to say the least. Zenith Energy has been emblematic of that. How many of you have heard about Zenith Energy? Some folks, it's been in the paper quite a bit. Zenith is a Texas-based fossil fuel company that transports fuel by rail through Portland and stores these fuels and chemicals at the hub. Most of the fuels are not used locally, but we take huge risks. Zenith itself forecasts that the majority of its products will be exported to California. In 2022, despite a powerful public outcry, including support from 22 state legislators and the entire Multnomah County Commission, after illegal lobbying by Zenith and under the guise of promises to transition to renewable fuel, the city went ahead and gave Zenith a permit that they had denied the year before. Next. Hub operators are highlighting a new agenda, moving towards renewable fuels big time. Zenith itself has announced plans to become the West Coast hub for these fuels. It sounds good, maybe, to move away from fossil fuels, but possibly these alternative fuels are not as dangerous as fossil fuels. So let's take a look at so-called renewable fuels. They go by many names and it's really confusing. Are there actually safe climate protecting non-fossil fuels? Next. 64% of renewable fuels are based on growing plants, soy, corn, and canola. What makes these fuels sound attractive is the idea that they can burn fuels based on these plants because, unlike fossil fuels, they can be grown again rapidly and absorb carbon that was generated by burning. Perfect, right? Sounds like it's a good plan. Next, but the promise of these fuels is actually debatable, and a lot of it's dependent on modeling. First of all, a huge amount of land must be cleared and used for feed crops. Today, nearly 60 million acres are used to grow corn and soy for biofuels. That's about the same as all the land in Illinois and Indiana combined. And this is just for 5% of fuels used for transportation. We get about the same amount of energy from 200,000 acres of solar panels. Even if, and this is debatable, there are fewer carbon emissions from burning these fuels, they still produce carbon dioxide, and we need to be drawing down carbon emissions boldly and rapidly from any type of burnable fuels. Building up the CEI hub to be a renewable fuels hub is losing precious time to turn boldly to the viable solution of energy efficiency, conservation, solar, and wind. Next. The clincher is science is 100% clear that the hub is not the place for storing fuels of any type, regardless of whether fossil-based or bio-based. These fuels are equally combustible and toxic as fossil fuels. Think about the earthquake. Next. The good news is we are fortunate to have a new city council and a new form of representative local government in which our voices can be more easily heard. Next. In the last half of the year, the city has launched the CEI Hub policy project to amend the comprehensive plan and zoning code with the goal of reducing risks at the hub. That's the goal, so keep that in mind. This is the process right now. We're in the proposed draft, so that the city came up with a preliminary draft with a lot of public feedback, and now they have a proposed draft after lots of more feedback, and that's going to be brought to the Planning Commission, where they'll have a public hearing and that we can all go to. So it's really important to make our voices heard about the need to prioritize community health and safety with respect to operations at the hub, because the city will also be hearing from industry. Next. Recently, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability released the discussion draft, and that's what I referred to earlier, the draft. It contains 4 alternative proposals for changes in the comprehensive plan and zoning. Unfortunately, the first 2 alternatives allow for expanded fuel storage at the hub. Alternative 3 maintains the current risk level, which, as noted, is high alert risky. So the first 3 don't reduce risk and are really just does, and pretty disappointing. Alternative 4 does draw down fuel storage by 17% by 2035. It's very minimal drawdown, and it's based on kind of market, what the market dictates, not what we're trying to push ourselves. Public comments ended October 17th, and out of those comments on these 4 alternatives, there were more than 500, and the vast majority said they wanted at least alternative 4 plus something stronger. The next draft that I mentioned, when it goes to the Planning Commission, is November 10th, so it's coming up. They'll release that draft. People will all be able to look at it, and then on December 16th, there'll be a public hearing before the commission, and we can let you all know more about that, and especially after we find out if they've done any changes to these alternatives. So it's really important that you know, we have our voices heard. Fortunately, the decision makers in the end are our elected city council, and we'll also be able to let them know how we feel about it. Next. So what can we do? Well, there's a lot to do. I think you're already on the list are you on the list to get updates from Nikki? Do you get them from the CEI Hub Task Force?
If we don't, we need to.
Okay, I'll make sure that you're on it, and you can individually get updates too, and we're pretty good about monthly getting updates on the legislation and anything that's going on in the city. And then also, if you want to have a liaison from this group to our task force, we can get the information directly to someone from your neighborhood association. And then it's always easy just to contact the city and say, hey, what are you doing about the health and safety risks at the hub? We have a sign-on letter, but before I get to that, there's also individual things you can do. We have every month we put on a free forum called Rumble on the River, and I have some information about the next one. It's going to be Willamette River Keeper, Columbia River Keeper, and one more river keeper. I feel bad that I'm 12, and it's going to be them all talking about what they do working on the river together and how we can support their work. And so that's really cool. But what we really would love you to do, if at all possible, next, is to sign on this sign-on letter that we are going to be sending to City Council. And we're going around all the neighborhood associations and quite a few organizations to sign on to. And we're hoping that you'll sign these. The first paragraph of the letter basically says that there's been studies that document the risk. We also say, okay, thanks for transitioning away from fossil fuels, but renewable fuels are also combustible and flammable and toxic. And we need to have public input in regards to health and safety next. And we have asks for our city council. We don't want any increase in dangers. That means any economic development shouldn't increase the danger at the hub. All fuels should be considered, not just fossil fuels, but all types of fuels and materials that are combustible, flammable, or toxic should be reduced at the hub. No new expanded fuels on the liquefaction soils. Portland should not be an export hub for renewable fuels, and we should be working with other agencies and governments to make sure that, we, can fully resource and fund the capacity to respond to emergencies there. So that's what we're asking. We signed off, and, we have a footnote in the letter that just gives a little bit more information about renewable fuels. And so far, these are the, signatories that we have from other neighborhood associations.
Oh, it's not up there.
Oh,
Sorry, I didn't
shoot.
switch.
Oh, okay. There it is, yay. So, we're going, somebody's at Kenton tonight, or next week, they're going to be at Kenton. We're just volunteers, and we're running around all the neighborhood associations, sharing the letter and trying to get sign-ons. And then we're also going to different organizations, and we've got these folks signed on so far. The next group, you can see that there's also a lot of other, 350, a lot of different groups. And then, next one is just a list of resources. You could take a picture. I can also send Brett. But, the big ask is, would you want to sign on to this letter? And if so, we'll add you on, and then you'll be invited to the press conference that we're gonna have one in February, like we did before, and invite, the city council. They'll be notified. So, any questions? A lot of information I just blasted at you.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
I have a question. Since generally before we vote to sign on to something, and we generally like to have time to read over and everything.
Sure.
So would a December timeline, like if we voted in December,
That's totally fine.
December 3rd, okay,
Yep,
that'd be ideal, just so we have enough time to absorb
Yeah, a
it,
lot
read
of
about it.
folks like to do that.
Yeah, and if it's until February, that gives us,
Yeah.
next month, I'll put it on the agenda.
Yeah, I know, that'd be great. And, I'll leave a few flyers just with information
Great.
about the hub and about the Rumble. And then, I don't know, folks, if anybody signs on to here, you'll get directly information from the task force. And I'll make sure that I get that to the person who does the newsletter for us.
Great,
So,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there do you have an online where you can sign up for stuff, or, do you know? It's okay.
We're not that organized.
Okay.
I mean, we're just like 7 people.
No,
Like,
okay,
who's gonna
all
go to that meeting? But if we do, like I said, we do send out information, and then, if you have questions, we can.
Great. Great, that's great.
On the submitting of the mitigation plans
Oh, from DEQ.
from the.
So, yeah, the Department of Environmental Quality are trying to, gently coerce the,
Course.
the industry into doing what they're supposed to be doing, to following, to sticking to the regulations. They're not doing any kind of fines or anything now. They're just trying to work with them to get those mitigation plan. And we've asked them that question quite a bit, like, okay, when does it come to the point where they're not doing anything? They're just dragging their feet. And so it's kind of like, I think DEQ is a little bit like that. They try to, work with industry, and I can see why, because they do want them to mitigate. But at some point, it's gonna take 10 years, to get there anyway. And when they're dragging their feet, it means more than 10 years. So, yeah.
Well, the company's just considering the fines cost of doing business.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, they don't.
Those fines mean nothing.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't, especially if they're, and they've talked about, like, at some point doing a big fine every single day. But we'll see if that ever happens.
Well, that's
Yeah,
where
I
it
think
becomes
that's what it would-
economical for them to.
I think that's what would have to happen. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
That was a nifty presentation, thank you.
Yeah.
Just how much of the CEI is Zenith? Is Zenith a little
Zenith's
piece of it?
one industry.
Huh?
It's just one industry there. Yeah.
So how many industries over there?
There's a ton of industries.
Well, PDX,
Mobile, I mean, Exxon, I mean, there's, Chevron, there's, I mean, God, I don't know, there's, I mean, a lot of
Okay.
industry, but Zenith is the one that brings in and exports, whereas other they have, they store, well, they all store stuff there, but Zenith exports out, whereas a lot of the other industry, the other fuel is then put on trucks. And, I mean, huge trucks, have you ever been down on have you ever been on the waterfront, southwest front, down there by that, you know, where you go to the dump? It's all along there, that's where all the industries are, and there's just trucks after trucks after trucks after trucks. They just truckload that stuff all through the state. You know, I mean, and then there's pipelines that come from Washington, where they process, and then those also come to the hub and then store it, and they're stored there. So, yeah, if you just spend a little bit of time there, you'll just be shocked by the amount of trucks that are going by, big trucks with all that fuel that's going out there. I mean, I know I spent the night there. I actually, we built a tiny house and built a garden at Zenith and to block the trains. And so we ended up spending the night there. We did get arrested and went to trial and got, the case got dismissed. We argued the necessity defense, that it was a greater necessity to block the trains than it was more important to do that. And a greater risk, the trains were than risking the, trespassing. So, we did go to trial. It was a, hung jury, and so the prosecutors decided to dismiss the case. But now they have barbed wire and walls, and you can't even see what's going on in there. Thanks to us. It was so open before that, you could see a lot.